Every single time I make a video about affairs, especially when I say that affairs can actually be the biggest opportunity you can have in your relationship, people go absolutely batshit crazy. But to date, what we see is that our program, our system has done the best job in creating the highest success rate of getting reconciliations for people even after affairs. And it's not just about reconciliation that makes the statistic very impressive. It's also that we have seen 0 relapses of couples who reconcile after an affair and then relapsed. We have also seen that with all the instances of people reconciling after affairs, the clients always say that their relationship is much better after the affair than they could even fathom before the affair. And so if you're feeling a bit betrayed right now, maybe you're angry at the fact that your partner is having an affair, maybe you're angry or feeling betrayed by the fact that your partner is wanting a divorce or separation, or maybe you are dealing with a case where your partner left you and she seems to have moved on from you very quickly, and you feel almost like you're rubbish, you're trash, you're chopped liver, as they say. And you're probably wondering right now, why would I even want to take him back? How do I deal with the betrayal? And could the relationship ever be restored? And if restored, would it always just be different? And would it always have those cracks and fissures that will never make it as good as it was before? I'm going to ask you 5 very brutally honest questions that you need to ask yourself. The same questions that I asked myself and the same questions that all these clients you see ask themselves in order for them to get to a higher playing field of thought, of paradigms that can actually help you not only reconcile, but go beyond reconciliation after your affair. And I know making this video will still open me up to a lot of hate, to a lot of misunderstandings, but that's okay. Because again, I want you to be able to live life to your fullest potential, just like these clients have. And again, guys, if you want no BS content that helps you get that permanent reconciliation and not the temporary or fake reconciliation that a lot of clients come to me for after beelining to other programs, then feel free to subscribe and also click the bell button as well to be notified when I post new videos every single week. And if you are already subscribed, I would really encourage you to vote with your likes and comments. And if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I switched to this longer form videos a while back. And ever since then, we've been getting fewer views, but and ironically, we've been getting the most success we've ever gotten in our program since we switched to this model. So if you're already subscribed, I would encourage you to vote with your likes and comments, especially your comments. They're really helpful to allow the YouTube algorithm to promote our videos to more people. As you know, videos that don't pertain to quick fixes or silver bullets don't often do well in the YouTube algorithm, but let's change that going forward so people can see more of these videos and so that we can help more people as well. So again, I'm going to divide this video into 5 basic main questions before we get to the what to do section. The first question I want you to ask yourself is really, what trophy do you want for yourself? So there are times when I get comments like these, when I make a video about affairs, and people often think that we are failing to consider certain nuances, certain angles, certain issues. And just like I said to this guy, it's not that we oversaw it. It's usually that we saw it and regarded it as a TBU, true but useless, fact. And so to illustrate this, let's start with the fact that whenever we get new applicants, there are sometimes when these applicants are very hell-bent on convincing us of their story. So they come in and say, hey, Jeff, I understand that you help these couples reconcile after affairs and maybe even go beyond reconciliation after affairs, but you don't understand, Jeff. My partner is a bit different. My partner is more of an asshole. My partner is worse than usual. She's less loyal than usual, right? So they're basically trying to either convince us that their partner is different and worse somehow, or they're trying to convince us that we don't understand how betrayed they feel, how pissed they feel, or they're trying to prove to us that they've done everything that is conceivably possible to try to save their relationship, to try to appease their partner, but there is nothing in their arsenal of tools, of levers that they can pull that they see could work. And so basically these cases are us saying, hey, your case is not that unique. Your partner is not that different, but they're really trying very hard to convince us of why their case or their partner is different than what we're telling them it is. And usually for these cases, I just kind of let them go on a little bit. And towards the end of the call, I ask them, okay, so you've spent the last 45 minutes trying to convince us of your story. So let's say I say to you right now that, yes, I am convinced that your partner is an asshole, that this is not your fault, that your case is unique. Your case is different than the 6,000 plus cases that we've taken in our program so far. Then I ask them, okay, now that you convinced me, what is your trophy? What do you get out of this? And I always just see their blank and confused look and they go, you know what? I don't know what the point of convincing Jeff that my partner is an asshole, of convincing Jeff that my case is different is. And here's the funny thing about this quote, right? The ego always wants to be right, but humility just wants to get it right. And I can understand why some people have the prerogative to want to convince me or people, the world, the internet, that their case is somehow different, their partner is somehow at fault. Because when you do this, when you basically externalize your problems to other people like this, you do get the ego boost in an internal sense of like you get to feel vindicated, but you also get it on an external sense to where you get people to buy into your narrative and to get on your side. And you absolve yourself of a lot of mistakes that you might have made. You absolve yourself of any work that you need to do in the future to fix the situation. But again, just like with the people that I asked this question to, ask yourself, okay, so let's say you make a comment on the internet, convincing me and other people that your partner having an affair is not your fault, that you've done everything, that it's all her fault. Are any of these ego things that you get as a benefit, are they real? To me, it's almost like winning Monopoly money. Because again, even if let's say you make a bunch of comments and you show up to the calls with us, try to convince everyone on the internet, even yourself, that this is not your fault, you've done everything and it's really your partner's fault for having an affair, for wanting a divorce, for wanting a separation. Again, the question is, what trophy do you win from that? Another way to see this is almost like, imagine you go to a therapist and you paid $500 an hour to see the best therapist in the market. And all you do during this therapist session is tell the therapist about how it's never your fault. You know, basically you are trying to selectively tell the story of your relationship, of your case, to where it shows that it's not your fault and how you're doing everything right. Think about it. Sure, the visit feels good because you will get to vindicate your own ego. But when you walk away from the $500 therapy session and you ask yourself, what did I just get from that beyond just some ego hit that I could just get for free? You realize that you just missed the whole point of the whole therapy session. To build on this example, let's say that the therapist then asks you, okay, can we look at perhaps what you can control and what you may have done wrong? What is your potential contribution? Or perhaps the therapist comes around and says, hey, in my opinion, I think here's what you may be doing wrong. And you get offended and you say, doc, but you don't get it, right? My partner is that, I have done this, I have done that. What do you get out of that? Does that sound right to you? Does that sound like the best use of $500 to just vindicate your story? What trophy did you get from it exactly? And so, you know, this image, sorry for the expletive there, but I thought it was a funny representation of what a lot of people do, which is that they go to a doctor, the doctor asks what's wrong, and they say, nothing is wrong with me. Okay, then why are you here, right? And I know this is a much more common phenomenon because I feel this whenever I go to a lawyer, I go to a doctor, I go to a therapist. Whenever I go to a doctor, for example, for those of you who know me, I'm very deep into longevity, deep into health stuff, and I live a very healthy lifestyle to reflect that. And so whenever I go to the doctor, I always try to go to the doctor to try to impress the doctor, to try to tell the doctor about all these great things about my diet, about my sleep, and so on. But I realized that if I just do that with a doctor, I'm kind of wasting that money. I'm kind of wasting that time. Really, what's a more useful thing to do is to tell the doctor about all the stuff I may not know, I may be confused about, the stuff that I'm missing, the stuff I'm questioning. So again, my job when I go to the doctor is not to impress the doctor, it's to inform the doctor. And so that's actually what we say to people coming into the program. Your job is not to impress coaches or impress the people of the internet. Your job is to really inform the coaches, inform people like me, inform people of the internet so they can actually see the objective reality, what's happening to you, so they can actually help you. So you need to be dead honest with us, with yourself, and you need to do less of telling the stories of what you're doing right and more the stories of what you may be doing wrong or missing. So again, the question goes into what trophy do you want? So if you want to go to the doctor and to convince the doctor that there's nothing wrong with you, that there's nothing you could have done differently, that it's all your partner's fault, then if that's a trophy that you want that ego boost, then so be it. But why do you really want that? Why do you really need that? And I get so many comments from people who are saying basically, why is it always the man that is to blame? And I always respond by saying, we have both men and women in our program. I never said the problem is the man or woman, but if you're looking for advice that tells you, yes, it's their fault and you just need to wait for them to do better, yeah, I'm not your guy. But if you want to take the commitment to own and take 100% responsibility for your 50%, then good. But remember, if you're both standing around saying, I'll wait to start until you start, then you both will just be standing forever. What's funny to me is that people come to watch relationship videos because obviously something is wrong in the relationship. But whenever someone actually says something and points out, hey, here's what could be wrong in your relationship, and what could be wrong could be you, they get really offended and say, how dare you tell me that? But imagine, right? You pay to hire a coach to tell you how to improve, to tell you how to get better. And they just tell you, yeah, it's not your fault. It's all your partner's fault. And there's nothing you could have done differently, nothing you could have done better. What is the point of a coach like that? And so remember again, people often think that growth looks like this. It's a linear thing and a natural artifact of time and experience, that the older you get, the more you go through, the more experience you have, you just naturally grow. But remember that growth is not always linear like this. Growth looks more like this to me, where there's a long period of flat periods, a short time when things catapult up, flat period again, catapult up, and so on. Because growth occurs through pain, failure, and discomfort. We cannot forget that, right? To be precise, growth happens when you are able to dig deep during these very painful, very uncomfortable moments. And I like to think of it like a slingshot, right? In my life, for example, I can count on one hand the number of very pivotal moments where I learned 90% of the things I have learned. And during these times, I need to go very deep to introspect about what could my potential flaws be, where could I have gone wrong. And the deeper I introspect, it's almost like a slingshot, the higher I catapult up. If I don't go deep here, just like the slingshot, it'll just be a dud. So these painful moments can be a great teacher for you. But the problem is that a lot of people waste the pain by thinking some thoughts that actually prevent you from going deep. They're not trying to not go deep on purpose, but they prevent you from going deep. So for example, if you are right now facing divorce or separation, or your partner having an affair, that to me is a great opportunity for you to dig deep and ask, okay, my partner went from someone who said, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, to I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you. There must be something I'm doing wrong here. As you go deep, that allows you to actually catapult higher. But if you absolve yourself of that discomfort by saying, for example, I've done everything, this is all her fault, there's nothing else I could do, how could you ever go deep? And if you cannot go deep, how could you ever slingshot yourself up? So we call this in our program wasting the pain. So if you get offended when I tell you, I'm not even saying this is your fault. I'm saying, hey, whenever these big moments happen, it's a good time to introspect. And if you get offended and you get into storytelling mode, that is you preventing yourself from going deep and catapulting higher. And in fact, we've made a video on this already. I'll put the link somewhere up here where I talked about the merits and the virtue of just pausing and thinking about your life and your contribution when you're faced with these very pivotal moments like this. There are a lot of clients who come to the program and I tell them, hey, I know you're going through an affair. I know this is the narrative you have in your mind right now, but I'm telling you right now that there are some things that you need to do. There's some flaws that you need to work on. And some people really don't like me when I say that. They join the program and they kind of like go away for a bit. So I let them go. But they always recommit eventually. And they recommit because they realize at the end of the day that this is really the only way. Because life is a lot easier, it's a lot better. You get a lot more falling outcomes when you raise your intrinsic value as you grow higher. And what we were saying in the program, right? If you don't want to do the work, then don't whine about not getting the outcomes. If you say you want the outcome, then don't whine about the work. And if you want to whine about the work, then don't say you want the outcomes. So again, the main question is, what trophy do you want? If you want to actually introspect, perhaps even learn something, perhaps catapult yourself to a higher state of growth and actually feel better for the long term, then perhaps this approach of playing victim, explaining your story, explaining yourself may not be the best strategy. So again, don't impress, but inform yourself. It's important to be very brutally honest with yourself at this point. And I know it's very hard right now and you feel betrayed, But for now, just understand the absurdity of playing victim here. In our program, we talk about this danger of the true but useless, the TBUs, where we say, if you allow just 1% of a true but useless type thing to basically distract you for 1% a day, that 1% will compound daily to make a 37x difference by the end of the year. Think about that. That is mind-blowing to me. So the second question to ask yourself is your ego really the problem here? So when we were planning our wedding, we had to prepare a dance for the crowd, for us as well. And so we hired a dance teacher. And what's funny is that this dance teacher is actually in my program right now. And she said to us at the end of the sessions that we were one of the better couples that she has worked with. And you can tell how good of a couple or how bad of a couple is by looking at how they deal with each other missing beats in the dance, in the learning process. And it's really about the difference between finding faults and taking responsibility. So a dance is a great example because let's say during a dance, my partner misses a beat. And let's say that if my partner misses a beat, that we spend the whole conversation around finding whose fault the missed beat is. And me trying to convince her that it's her fault and me expecting her to admit that it's her fault. Think about how unproductive this conversation would be. Think about how defensive that would make each other feel. And think about how this conversation may snowball and spiral into something that's just toxic and unhealthy. Again, it's true. You're debating and arguing about something that's true, that it is your partner's fault that your partner missed a beat. But again, it's useless at best and harmful at worst. So for us, whenever we dance, and life and relationship is really like a dance, we don't really take time to argue over whose fault it is. It doesn't really matter whose fault it is. We take into account responsibility. And if you look at the word responsibility, it's two words: responsibility, your ability to respond. So the question that comes to our minds right away is, sure, you missed a beat. Doesn't really matter though. But what was my contribution to you missing that beat? Where did I go wrong? What was I missing? And how could I help you to be on beat later? And so the conversation doesn't become, hey, Sam, you missed a beat. And let's convince ourselves that, let's be clear. Let's say for the record that it is your fault here. The conversation doesn't even go there. Instead, it goes into, okay, you missed a beat. Doesn't matter. Water under the bridge. What next? What did I do to cause you to miss that beat? And what can I do differently? What can I do differently to help you not miss the beat in the future? Think about how much more productive that conversation is and how not defensive it'll make people feel. And think about the positive feedback loop this creates over time. And so whenever I see someone dealing with an affair or their partner wanting a divorce, how they respond to that tells me a lot. If they are focused on whose fault it is, the word fault is such a big deal in their mind. This shows a lot about how they probably communicate on the daily. And it's maybe a major reason why their partner never felt safe and wanted to leave, never felt special in the first place. And what's funny is that if your mind is always surrounded around faults, you'll always remain blind to the issue. Same for the dancer who keeps blaming the other person, right? He may never see how unproductive and how toxic it's being. And he'll probably never resolve the issue. And he'll probably see that every issue is unresolvable when it actually is. So the quote here is really great in saying that what you say about others says more about you than them. Because I get that you feel betrayed, I get you feel angry and so on, but what you do, what you think, what you say, what you feel at this point says a lot. If you're hell-bent right now, just blaming your partner and wanting to impose this narrative that it is all your partner's fault, that you've done everything, that should tell you a lot about you, about why your partner wanted to leave, why your partner never felt safe. And note that even if you think this, maybe you say to yourself, you never say it, that it's my partner's fault. Even if you think it, that thought will affect how you feel, and how you feel will affect the Freudian slips, the micro expressions, the microtones in which you say it with. And I know a lot of you are saying right now, but Jeff, you don't get it, right? My partner is a bit different here. Sure, there are some cases where their partner is great and they're not having an affair because they're an asshole, and afterwards they can come back together and actually become better than usual. But my partner is a bit different. Now, I want you to think about the insinuation you're making about your partner there. You're basically saying, right, my partner is so fucked up, so messed up, so immature, so evil, that even when I've done everything to give all the value that she needs from this relationship, she still goes ahead and betrays me anyway. Now, think about this. Think about what if your partner right now has that low of a viewpoint of you, that she thinks that you're so idiotic, you're so evil, you're so dumb that even though you've given everything, you still will make the worst choice possible. That you are having an affair, for example, you are wanting a divorce or separation, not because you're trying to escape a problem, but because you're just negligent, you're just evil. Would you ever feel safe in that? So what's funny is that, people who often say that they've done everything, they don't see the paradox in that statement, in that if you insinuate your partner is that stupid, that evil, how could you have given as much safety as you thought you have given? The right way to think here is really to switch your mind away from finding faults in your relationship, in everything you do, to taking responsibility. And this is just a change in mental habit. When mistakes are made, even small or big mistakes, do you find faults or do you take responsibility? And so personally, in my own life, whether it's work, whether it's personal life, whether it's relationships, I don't like to blame people, but I like to blame systems. I instantly, my mind goes into what systems are broken, how did I contribute to that system, and how can I help fix it? Doesn't matter whose fault it is. That is not the problem. Let's just introspect within. So if you're dealing with a divorce, dealing with affair right now, right, it's very easy for you to get the conversation to be about whose fault it is, but that's just TBU. I would encourage you to just look within and say, okay, doesn't matter whose fault. What was my contribution to the problem? What could I have done differently? What could I improve on to help the other person also deliver the end of the deal? Question number 3 is, do you even have the right to be angry? And what you need to understand here is that you're asking your partner something very big, right? You're asking your partner to spend her one and only life with you, to spend the rest of the entirety of her one and only life with you, and never look elsewhere or betray you. Now, if you're going to ask something that big, basically you're asking someone to sell their soul to you, to be enslaved to you, to be stuck in this world and not look elsewhere for the rest of their lives. If you're going to ask something that big, is the value you've given commensurate? Does it justify the value that you're asking for? So we've talked a lot about this in previous videos before, about what it means to actually be a high value man, what it means to be a high value partner. And a lot of people are very good at giving low level values like the financial needs, security needs, physical needs, all these things. But if you look at the higher pillars of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you'll realize that very few men actually understand how to give people the love and belonging, the safety needs, the self-actualization needs. Again, many men can give lower level values, but how many can give the higher level values? So if you want to watch that video on what it means to be high value, I'll leave a link up above here. But if you're honest with yourself, most people will say not really, right? Because again, women don't leave men if they are providing the 5 levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. When your partner wants to leave, there is a reason there. People don't just leave for no reason. And if you're honest with yourself and say no, then why the fuck are you offended that she doesn't want you? I see so many young people these days who are in the dating scenes, for example, and they try to ask out this girl and they get offended when their girl says no. And then I'm like, don't get offended, because what you're asking of them is something very big. But then a lot of people now come to me and say, oh, but Jeff, like what I'm really angry about is that my partner didn't divorce me first before having the affair. Wouldn't just be the right thing to do? Just divorce me first and then have the affair. And to these people, I would say, are you sure your partner hasn't been giving you clues as to ways or areas where she's a bit unhappy, maybe ways and areas that she wants you to change, maybe? Haven't she really been giving you clues? What have you been doing with those clues? And this is really an opportunity to showcase the difference between, I guess, the healthier view and how I've come to see relationships and how most people see relationships. I think when most people get married, for example, when most people enter into a long-term relationship, they really come from a very selfish place of, what can you do for me? What can I get from you? And they take love, they take commitment, they take loyalty as a given, right? Just because you sign a contract that says you're going to be my husband or you are my wife, that you are forever indebted to me, that now I will get that respect, that commitment, that loyalty as a given. Basically, a lot of people, I think, see their partner like a piece of property that they own and control. And basically, a lot of people treat, for a better word here, like their partner is someone they're kidnapping. I don't care if you want to be here or not. I don't care how I'm treating you right now. I don't care how you feel about this relationship. Once we sign that marriage paperwork, it is not not okay for you to have an affair. It is not okay for you to think about other people. And my view of relationship and marriage is that my partner is taking a very high opportunity cost to be with me. And I will endeavor forever to be my best for her so she can be her best for me as well. But it starts with me becoming the best for her. And so every day of our relationship, I always see love, commitment, and loyalty as something I need to constantly earn for my partner and justify why being loyal to me, being committed to me, being loving to me is a good idea given the opportunity cost of other people, being single, etc. And if she wants to leave tomorrow, for example, because she thinks that she can find happiness somewhere else, I will come from the place of I love her and I won't say no to that. I won't stop her from doing that because again, I do not own her. She has the right to seek her own highest peak, highest happiness, highest fulfillment for herself. And if she thinks that she can find a higher level of happiness, higher level of fulfillment, higher level of whatever apart from me, then I will not be offended by that. Instead, I will look within and say, let's not talk about faults, let's talk about responsibility. What did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? And what can I do and how can I do to provide higher level values? What can I do to be better here? How can I become the higher peak myself? So my job every day that I see it is to understand her, get a very objective view of the value that I bring and how she feels about me and the relationship. And my job is to become the best version of me so I can continuously provide the higher level values, the highest level values, and trust that she's actually smart enough to understand how to choose and view the correct thing. And I realized that to a lot of people, this can sound very batshit crazy because it feels like I'm allowing my partner to just walk all over me. But actually the opposite happens, right? Because I do this, because I never take my marriage for granted and I'm always kept very sharp and never allow myself to sabotage the relationship. I create this feedback loop where she feels safer. When she feels safer, there's less self-reservation. When there's less self-reservation, there's less toxic behaviors. There's less toxic behaviors. It makes it easier for me to keep growing safety. And the other feedback loop that I create too is because I create safety. There's more admiration. There's more appreciation. And the more she wants to do for me. It's like, again, when we talk about admiration in our 5 pillars, it's really that. Imagine you are having lunch with someone you truly admire. You're going to do your best, to dress your best, to talk your best, to be your best because it's someone you admire, right? So when you create this very strong mutual admiration in a relationship, you can create an environment where both people will eventually want to be the best version of themselves for each other. And that makes it easier for me to keep growing safety as well. And this is really the paradox of what we call falling outcomes. And relationships are really falling outcomes, is that what you resist persists. So many men are afraid to let go of control that they end up losing grasp. It's almost like they try to grab on so hard to the piece of sand that it just slips through their fingers, right? Or the Chinese finger trap. The more they try to pull it apart, the more it sticks together. It's just a very paradoxical phenomenon. It's also a very self-fulfilling prophecy where because they're so afraid and so paranoid and come from the place of control, they do a lot of things to sabotage their relationship, and that sabotaging the relationship will pull their partner further apart. And when their partner pulls further apart, the more paranoid they get, the more they destroy the relationship and so on. It's why, a lot of people, when they come into a new relationship, not having gone over or overcome or properly coped with the previous traumas in the previous relationship, they might subconsciously do things to sabotage their relationship by not opening themselves fully, for example, by not completely letting go of control, for example. And that can lead to the self-fulfilling demise of the relationship as well. And it's actually the moment when you stop trying to control and own your partner that they come to you. So for me, for example, right now, I used to be the kind of guy who would want so much control over my relationship, over my partner. And whenever I see that I'm losing grasp of her and she's kind of going away from me, I tend to pull her back in. But me pulling her back in actually makes her not want to be there even more and want to pull away even more. And so the more I pull, the more she drifts apart. But the more I let go and just operate from the state of being the brightest lighthouse, being the highest peak, the more I attract, the more I draw her into me on her own accord. And the fourth question to ask yourself really is about, are you robbing yourself of pride? And so a lot of people, they use the vase example when it comes to affairs a lot. So they say, for example, once you break a vase, you can fix it, but it will never be the same again. To me, this is a very terrible quote, and it's just a bunch of bullshit. I would encourage people to just stop thinking this way. And to understand this, there's really 3 levels of states you need to know about, right? For anything in life, it can be fragile, robust, or anti-fragile. So for fragile, think about a vase, right? You break it, the more pressure you place on that vase, the more likely it will break. For robust, think about it like a diamond or a rock. If the more pressure you put on it, it can basically clench its asshole to keep its own shit in, but eventually with enough pressure, it'll just break. And anti-fragile is really an inverse correlation between pressure. So the more pressure it gets, the stronger it gets. And if you think about it, relationships, just like our human body, is really an anti-fragile state. Where with our body, for example, when you get sick, you don't just get weaker. you actually get stronger sometimes when you get sick because your body can create immune systems. So it's not just robust. It's not just like your body is just withstanding things. It's really anti-fragile. The more pressure it gets, the more it rises. And relationships are actually the same thing. It's an organism that is anti-fragile, but its anti-fragility really depends on the immune system of our relationship. So for example, if our immune system is bad, then yes, getting sick is a massive threat. But if our immune system is healthy and normal and functioning, then getting sick can actually be a good thing. If you read books like Guns, Germs, and Steel, you'll see how a lot of warfare in the beginning actually is biological. For example, when the Americans came to invade the Indian lands, it wasn't weapons that won the war. It was the fact that the native Indians were just not immune to diseases. So for a lot of relationships where they don't have any anti-fragile processes, and for a lot of people, because they don't have any anti-fragile processes, anti-fragile systems, challenges become a threat. But if you have anti-fragile approaches, then basically if you have a good immune system, then sicknesses are actually a massive opportunity. The same way for us, for example, I can think in two hands the number of very pivotal, very difficult moments that we face in our relationship, and each one, because we've developed an anti-fragile immune system, if to our relationship, is really made us stronger rather than weaker. So you get sometimes to wonder why challenges destroy some couples and challenges build some couples, is because whether they have an anti-fragile immune system or not. And in fact, this is the only way to get to anti-fragility, right? Imagine every time you get sick, you say to life, I want to restart and I want to start a clean slate with a new body, with a new mind that is healthy. Then how can you ever become anti-fragile? And this can sound ridiculous, but this is what a lot of people do when they start a new relationship, the relationship breaks down, and when it breaks down long enough and deep enough, you say, I want a new one, right? But you will never get to the state of anti-fragility that way. And this is really the only way you can get to pride. For me, I'm very glad that my relationship started off in a very rocky spot with so many difficulties and so many challenges, because pride is reserved for people who have patience, the tenacity, and the grit to welcome and overcome challenges. So think about this. Think about anything you feel proud of in life, your work, anything like that, right? For me, I feel proud of my work because I built it despite the odds. There was blood, sweat, and tears. There were so many challenges that came with it, and I overcame it. With my relationship, I'm now in the state where I'm happy with my relationship, but I'm also very proud of it because of the challenges that we went through. But if you were given a happy relationship from the very beginning without any challenges, you can never feel proud of it. So again, when you face a challenge like this, that is life giving you the opportunity to access pride. Are you going to take it, or are you going to throw away this opportunity like how a lot of people throw away that opportunity, right? And this is why, again, when my clients reconcile after affairs, they realize that the relationship can actually get better after the fact, because again, they start to understand that relationships are really anti-fragile. Okay, so the fifth question to ask yourself is, what do I do now? So number one is really turn your mental habit away from looking at faults and into responsibilities. Basically, keep asking yourself, right, whenever things happen, don't try to get into the conversation of whose fault it is, but really focus on what is in your internal locus of control rather than external locus of control. What have you done? What are you currently doing? What was your contribution? And what can you do better? What can you do differently? What can you do to grow? And this can seem like a very inconsequential move, but in my experience watching a lot of clients, this small mental shift is a massive deal, because as they say, like, the quality of the questions you ask in life determines the quality of the answers you get. So if you are going through the world asking always, whose fault is it? That's the kind of answers you will find. And the kinds of answers you'll find will always be true but useless. And you'll remain blind to so many opportunities, so many key lessons that you could have learned. And the same with the dancing lesson, right? If someone misses a beat and we just make the conversation about whose fault it is, that is time we're not spending on discussing next steps, on taking ownership, taking responsibility. And you can see from an example how one path would lead to a very toxic cycle and how the other path would lead to a very productive cycle. You can see how over 3 years, over 5 years, a relationship can blossom in one hand and a relationship can really degrade on the one hand because of all that death by 1,000 cuts where we choose to play faults instead of responsibilities. So here, this is why we place such a high premium on internal shifts and getting rid of victim mindsets, because really, when you get rid of the victim mindset, that is where you turn your mental habit away from faults and into responsibilities. And that's a massive step. And if you are not in the program, then you can also check out my internal shift series where I talk about this as well. But that's the first step. The second step is really about growing your intrinsic value. This is by far the hardest thing that my clients go through, at least according to them. So in everything in life, there's extrinsic value and intrinsic value. So intrinsic value here is represented by the yellow line here as your actual value. And the extrinsic value is this black line where it's really the perceived value. So you can think about this like stocks, right? So let's say a company is worth $100 per share. It's not going to be $100 per share every single day. Sometimes the stock price will go to 120, sometimes they go to $80, sometimes they go to $70. But at the end of the day, all these fluctuations in extrinsic value doesn't change the intrinsic value, which is $100. Same thing in life, right? So extrinsic value equals perceived value. Intrinsic value equals actual value. So I think what happens to a lot of relationships is that it begins with the honeymoon phase, right? Where let's say your intrinsic value is here. And because of the honeymoon phase, you get rose-colored glasses and you see and you perceive the relationship, the partner, to be better than it is. Then over time, you start to kind of mean revert to the intrinsic value. Okay, maybe I had two rose-colored glasses in how I see things before. I can see the ugliness now, right? And after a while, you realize that, oh shit, this is really bad. And so as time goes on, the EV eventually goes closer to the IV, the intrinsic value, and eventually it may even go below. And when your relationship has gone to the point where the affair has happened, or the desire for divorce or separation has happened, usually what happens is that the extrinsic value has dipped low enough. Now you have two options here. You either assume, number one, that your IV is high and that the EV has just dipped for some other problem, right? But again, what is the point of this? What trophy do you get from assuming this? The second assumption is assume your IV is low, you work on raising your intrinsic value. And this is what I encourage my clients to do, is that when you face a moment like this is the moment to dig deep and really see, okay, what could be wrong with my IV here and how can I increase it? And this is very painful in the short term, but very rewarding in the long term, because as you increase your intrinsic value, your EV will eventually mean revert towards that higher IV. So you'll find that, yes, you might have lows still, but you will have higher lows, you will have higher highs over time, as long as you keep working on your intrinsic value. Just note also that extrinsic value is also a falling outcome, where some outcomes of striving, where the more willpower we exert to it, the more likely we are to get the outcome. With falling outcomes, like sleeping, for example, the more willpower we exert towards it, the less likely we are to get that outcome. And so this EV is really a falling outcome. It tends to mean revert towards the IV. So I always ask my clients, right? So let's say right now, you found a way to say the perfect words and you find a way to do the perfect thing to convince your partner that you've changed. Let's say you take a loan and get $1 million and you give it to your partner and says, this is how much I love you. Would your partner believe your changes? And the answer is always no. Because really the magic words and the magic actions don't exist. The silver bullets do not exist. And often there's nothing more to be said when your partner wants an affair or divorce or separation. And your partner actually has spent enough time with you to know what your actual intrinsic value is. So no point trying to fake it, because the jig is really up at this point. So if there's nothing you can do to affect the EV in the short term, then why think about it? So my clients focus on this learning called untethering, because really it's about just effort and surrender to increasing this intrinsic value. And you will realize that before you know it, your EV will catch up to that as well. So what does it mean to raise your intrinsic value? It's focusing on all the things that we teach in the program. So in our program, we make it a fun game in our community, right? We gamify this journey of getting this extrinsic value. And what the clients realize, again, is that as you increase your IV, more and more outcomes will eventually fall to you. And so we gamify this. And if you look at a lot of my client stories, you will hear a lot of people saying, for example, that because they're so focused and so obsessed about the game of growing IV, that the EV often comes before they expect it. Instead of asking, are we there yet? It's, oh, we're here already, kind of phenomenon. And number 3 is really to raise your standards and norms. Understand, again, what you're truly asking your partner to do here. And that if you're asking your partner something that big, know that good enough is not often good enough. Raise what you're willing to tolerate. So it's why the community in our program is so crucial, and why this concept of raising standards is such a hot topic in our program as well. And why it's so crucial to surround yourself with the coaches and myself, because it's important to see how the coaches live, how I live. It's very difficult to operate by really high standards when high standards are often judged, or you often feel guilty for operating at high standards. But it's much easier to operate at high standards when high standards becomes the norm, when you actually feel guilty for not operating by high standards. So I don't know if you ever face this in class, in school. I was one of those kids in school who tends to raise their hands up a lot and ask a lot of questions. But the culture made me feel so guilty and feel so bad for actually raising my hands all the time, right? So that's an example where society may be making it very hard for you to actually operate by high standards, because it's making you feel guilty for doing the right thing. And so if you spend more and more time with people who create very high levels of the 5 pillars in a relationship every single day, you will start to feel a bit ashamed and a bit guilty in a good way when you don't create as high a level of the 5 pillars as you should. Or if you are in a community where people don't accept making tiny mistakes and making tiny Freudian slips in a relationship, it makes it easier for you to not let those small mistakes compound over time. And number 4 is just campaign. And this is just about using the frameworks to be able to start and initiate conversations in a very artful way that allows your intrinsic value to be shown, to be displayed. If you're dealing with an affair, for example, a lot of my clients actually use this to campaign about, hey, what is it that you like about the other guy? What is it that I did, or what is it that was missing about the relationship that led you to not feel satisfied? And this can become a very fun, a very lighthearted conversation, a very interesting adventure if done correctly, if campaigned correctly for a lot of my clients. But again, this requires a very strong grasp of the framework. So it can backfire if not done properly, genuinely, but you need to campaign, because this campaigning allows you to not only campaign and display your intrinsic value, but it can also allow you to understand many subtle shortcomings and many subtle nuances of what you could be missing, what could be flawed about your intrinsic value that you would never have seen otherwise. And the last thing, again, is make all these things you discover about flaws in your IV into an identity-based change. So I made a video on this before about what is an identity-based change and why identity-based change is so crucial. So I'll leave you with that video if you are interested in knowing more about that. And guys, remember also that if you want to apply for the Relationship Revival program, you can do so by joining our masterclass first. At the end of the masterclass, I'll show you how to apply for the program step by step if you're interested in doing so.